Hello, this is my general process vlog for April 20th, 2011. A point that I have been working with for quite some years is the point of faith. And for me, faith represents acceptance. Okay? Like to say, the female accepts and receives the male. And so I use the point of faith to understand myself as male and female. I use the point of faith to open myself up to anything and everything that I might receive God completely. Both that which one may define as God and that which one may not define as God. Simply because, to me, God is everything, whether it is recognized as God or not. And to me, the term God is even, the picture it creates is not accurate. And so I must accept that. Accept that even with limited speech, I can accept limitless speech, which is action, if you will. Now, faith, although I started out with the whole church Christian concept of faith and how it's this pie in the sky, etheric, non-physical attribute. In my process, I attempted to give it substance by works, as it says, as I grew up believing, faith without works is dead. So, in order to have living faith, one must live according to one's faith, or at least if one has faith, to live according to that faith. And a practical example would be a world that is best for all, or heaven on earth, because that does not exist as of right now. And yet, I trust that as I have faith, it can. And although that faith is still somewhat unsubstantial, it is, to me, I'm sort of torn, because faith in itself is not for today. It's always for the next moment. Even if it is in today, it is not for this moment, it is not for here. Because I don't need faith to receive what I already have. And in that, I am moving beyond faith, or beyond belief. And because of the vocabulary I've set up in my mind, I don't quite understand where to take this next. For example, faith, trust, to me is the same word. How does one trust or receive trust without the system called faith? Is trust not to exist? Because to me, trust is saying, I accept you have ultimately two potentials. One is for goodness, one is for badness. However, I trust you're going to go this way as opposed to this way. But if you truly know someone, that is, you know what they're going to do, and that the point of choice is removed, there is no point of trust, because there's no question as to what is going to be done. Because even if you trust someone is going to take a certain path, there is no definite answer until it actually happens. And in that, trust is removed and the point is realized. And so, yes, I've prided myself on my faith because I was able to stand in the face of everything and simply brush it off or not bat an eye, or at least in my mind I was able to stand one and equal to everything as everything in my faith, because my faith would fill in the gaps and allow me to be complete without realizing completion. I used faith as a point of acceptance. As I said, faith receives. Because I wanted to be accepted. And so I would use my faith to accept anything and everything. I looked around and I saw that God, the cosmos, accepted and allowed everything. And there was nothing that did not, or is not, or could not take place at any given point. And in this I saw perhaps even the cosmos having faith in itself. Because accepting and allowing all of these things, all of this abuse, all of this, ignorance, is self-destructive to the cosmos as itself. Because if it exists here on Earth, it exists everywhere in the cosmos as the cosmos. And so I used this idea of the cosmos itself using faith to substantiate and accumulate my concept of faith. It's really hard to talk in the moment because I forget what I say from one moment to the next and where it's going. But this point of reception I used so that anyone could come to me and I could receive them. I would not judge them. I would accept that, for instance, okay, this person is a thief. I accept they are a thief at this moment. But that does not mean I move on and allow them to continue in thievery. It says, being a thief at this moment is your starting point. First, acknowledge that you're not a thief, because to identify oneself as any one thing would be demonic possession. Instead, realize I thieve, and therefore it is based on the actions that I do. And that goes back to the point of trust, because I trust I'm a thief, and therefore I'm going to thieve. And in that, faith to a certain point is useful, even as I might consider what is best for all. Because until that point of the realization of what is best for all, the work we put into it is only, say, 38.7% complete, which in 100% circle, or 100% sphere, 100% whatever that might be called, there's still this part that is not complete. And yet, one accepts that the process potentially can be completed, so that faith would fill in that point, and ideally one uses their faith to direct them in the direction that one needs to go to accumulate completeness and move beyond faith. And so this is how I work, and things, these realizations that I've had, especially regarding my concept of Christ and my concept of God, and the that which is pleasing, that which is not pleasing, I became very bitter because I wanted to please God. And of course, it says it is impossible to please God without faith. And in order to please myself, I would layer the words so that when I read the verse, it is impossible to please God without faith, I would also read, it is impossible to will God without faith. It is impossible to run God without faith. So that this motion picture of what the word razón in this instance means, and in that I accepted and allowed myself to convince myself I'm living in a multi-dimensional existence. And it was a point of faith because I did not see it. And as they say, we do not walk by sight, but by faith. And so the point of living in this world that, in my mind I've always considered darkness, that, this is false light, and in reality, these eyes don't work. It's all an illusion. It's a projection. It's not actually there, if you will. And in that, who needs sight anyway? Because eyes do not work in the darkness. At least these physical eyes do not work in the darkness. And I was mixing the two. I was mixing this, one might call mental sight or insight, with outsight. And this point of blinding myself by shutting my own eyes, by staring at the sun, straining every ounce of effort I could to see something, and simply having to satisfy myself with hearing things. I became bitter because I wanted to see God. I wanted to see Him face to face, or it, whatever it might be. I wanted to experience God, even though my concept of God was trapped in my mind and didn't truly exist. And so I began to ignore that which I told myself I accepted God to be, which is everything. And I began to quantify the concept of God. I began to qualitative the concept of God. I don't quite know what that word should be. And so I separated myself from myself, because I accepted and allowed myself to be this concept of God, and yet I was not accepting and allowing myself to truly be everything. I was picking and choosing what everything actually meant. And instead of trying to continue in this and simply correct it, because that is what I tend to do. I tend to try and make what is wrong right instead of accepting wrong for wrong and right for right. Because I believe that everything inherently has both natures within it. As an atom has both positive and negative in each atom. And this is the point I'm apprehensive about, because I do not want to let go. I don't want to, in the end, find out that I was right. That I was right to hold on to anything and everything. Only to come, only to have let it go in the past, and now I lack it because I let it go. they say if it's true, it will return. And if something tries to leave you, do not hold on to it. Um, that is simply a point where I must just breathe, because I must accept that as the natural way. And that scrambling to hold on to things is as one trying to grasp water in one's hand, and it just squishes out. And the more one tries to grasp water, the less one actually holds water. And so it is a point where, I get excited and I think, oh my God, what am I actually doing? Because it is a split second decision, if you will. And so I just simply accept, let it go if it leaves, do not stop it when it comes my way. And that is hard for me. It is not an easy thing to just let go and to conceive of myself as letting go of part of myself in order to accept another part of myself. So I've been struggling with that idea of beyond belief. Because it's so right here. It's, to say there's that point of light which I can actually see, but beyond that point I cannot see. And that is what no faith means to me. That I accept there are points I do not see. Because I do see. But I also accept that even though I do not see beyond this point, that whether I see it or not, whether or not I trust it or not, there is substance beyond this point I can see. And again, this sounds like a point of faith, where I am having to accept and allow myself to accept the point beyond sight. Because these eyes are limited in their use. And, I'm not even able to see around this corner, even though it exists. And I can picture in my mind what is beyond this corner. Because I've seen it and I can use my memories to fill in the gaps, but that is not actual sight. And instead of relying on my faith to ensure I do not judge, I simply commit myself to not judge, so that no matter what world I live in, that is, whether it's a world that is best for all, a world that's progressing to what is best for all, or a world that is not best for all. Did I ever say that? But I'm trying to go for a world that is best for all, a world that is not best for all, and a world that is progressing to what is best for all. That faith truly is a thing of the past. And that's the sun peeking over the horizon. Because it's starting to glimmer a little bit, if you will. And the sky is no longer black or dark blue. It is starting to turn a little bit gray. And the birds are starting to sing. And they're welcoming the sun. And the earth is preparing to warm up. At least this side of the earth. I've also been facing the point of my aggressive backchat, because I would use it as a point to build myself up, to be like, yeah, look how smooth I am. And if reality actually happened like that, boy, I'd just kick their ass, or I'd show them what's up, and they would regret treating me like this. And um, my words become like a sword, and they just stab right to the heart of them. And I would encourage it. Because I felt so weak and insecure and helpless that um, if only they knew what they were dealing with. Um, I actually let them off easy by not becoming violent, I guess, because I've never been physically violent. I mean, I have in the past on occasion. Um, but it was just a handful of times, and I'm not trying to justify by saying it was a small amount, but to say there are some violent people out there who practice violence regularly. Me, I've never really done that. You know, I avoid walking on ants on the sidewalk. Um, I will pick up a worm that is on the sidewalk and put it back in the grass. I do not enjoy death, and even physical violence represents, say, the death of cells or the death of blood vessels, and hurting someone, even deep down, I know, or at least I trust and accept that I am hurting the image of God, and that I am equal to that, and to harm them is to harm myself, and I really don't go for that. Even if I really, really want to, I become heatedly possessed with just, it's almost, I can barely contain myself, and it's not containing the violence, it's just containing an explosion where that is the final point. And I'll glare, and I'll just walk on, and I want them to know what they did not set well with me. And that is usually enough, because I consider myself to have this weight in people's minds. And as long as they know what they did to me I find unacceptable, or what they did to someone else I find unacceptable, I've accomplished my goal, and violence is not necessary to convey that, because violence is what people do when they feel they have no other options, when they're willing to ignore the fact of what they're doing, they're actually doing to themselves. And that is a point I refuse to pass. And although it's been a struggle sometimes, and I have encouraged myself to be inwardly violent and aggressive, and to be cool and smooth like they are in, you know, anime and manga and comic books and whatnot, I have also encouraged myself to always stop and to never lose consciousness, as people say they black out and I just didn't know what happened. I just never, that I can remember, ever allowed myself to be possessed to the point of I have no control over myself. Even if I have been possessed in the past, it is as though the possessor is riding shotgun and carrying the map and telling me where to go and what to do, and even though I'm behind the wheel, I have the choice to accept their direction or not. And sometimes I do, but to me it is always from the point of I wouldn't do this if I didn't want to. Because even if I'm not aware of far-flung consequences, I am aware of immediate consequences, and physical violence always has consequences. And I don't want consequence. You know, I want a world without consequence, where I can truly be free. And in order to encourage that, that is what I give. Um, that is what I encourage. And I've noticed I have been stopping myself and saying no. As the back chat arises, I will face these points that I would normally go into, because it would normally be just a few scenarios, and um, the faces would change over the years. However, how I dealt with it and their complete and utter ruin never really changed. And it was simply a point to bolster my ego and um, encourage my mental superiority, inferiority complex. But as I've practiced breath and I've actually acknowledged the back chat as back chat and not being physical, you know, not being real, no matter how real I may make it feel within myself, I have progressively stopped. Although I still find myself energetically expressing anger in my back chat and frustration and all this just darkness that I've accumulated over the years because of ignorance. I am still progressively directing my back chat to be harmonious as much as possible. I do remember instances when I was very little, I would react violently. Um, I remember one point, maybe I was 2 or something, and I was pitching a fit, as we say, squalling and crying, and I was on my back outside, and I was kicking the door, the metal screen door we had, and I was kicking it. But after a certain point, I don't know exactly why or when, but I was still very quite young. I just ceased all of that outward expression. I stopped putting myself out there, if you will. And I just internalized it all. Do you have a difference in definition between considerate and thoughtful? Um, to me, being considerate is practically the same thing as the term thoughtful, because to me the term thoughtful means I consider in my thoughts that which is at least immediately consequential, including people's thoughts and their feelings and their physical bodies and their wants and desires. And is this a point where I encourage thoughts, feelings, and emotions? Or is it a point where I actually just accept that they exist and I try and tiptoe around the issue while still acknowledging the issue. And that to me is being considerate. Because I could just get in people's faces and, tell them to fucking wake up. But that seems detrimental to the cause. And to me that is being considerate. Is it a coincidence that structural resonance alignment has the same acronym as satanic ritual abuse? I've considered that often. Did you do it on purpose to have a play on words? Or did you simply call it structural resonance alignment and it happened to have the same acronym as satanic ritual abuse? And interestingly, no doubt the term satanic ritual abuse is a Christian term that the non-Satanists called what was going on. And yet, through the phrase satanic ritual abuse, they are accepting a point where satanic ritual is not abusive because they specified what kind of satanic ritual is occurring. And to Satanists, I'm sure all their rituals are non-abusive. Or if they do, they simply accept it as abuse and deny that part of it, such as the abducting of children and the killing of animals and whatnot. And speaking of which, it brings to mind the point of the religion called voodoo or vodou, and how some people have said that vodou is a religion as significant and as structured, as any other religion. And so they accept vodou and their practices, such as animal sacrifice and demonic possession, and say, well, that's just their culture. And although I've always had respect for the potential of each religion because of their scriptures, I have not recently, because when I was younger, I was a Bible thumper Christian. I'm not a Bible thumper, but I was very into the Bible. I was very into the whole idea of church and prayer and whatnot. But as I progressed, I lost my respect for the religions that people were using the excuse it is their culture or it is the tradition to accept and allow this abuse to continue. And to me, that is unacceptable. Because they will say, well, in the case of vodou, it was essential and inextricable from the independence movement in Haiti. And therefore, it is beneficial to the Haitians in general because it solidifies them. It brings all these desperate cultures from Africa and unites them with one religion. And so they're able to exist as a unified country and a single culture. And yet, if one looks at Haiti, in no way has vodou actually supported these people. it's, whether directly or indirectly, encouraged extreme poverty, um, despots, and a clinging to tradition as if the tradition is more important than what is actually here. One way to know if someone is using tradition as a point of abuse, as a point of self-defense to protect their ego and the ego of those who came before them, is to see how bendable that tradition is, to see how far they're willing to let that tradition evolve to fit current situations. And most people are not willing to allow tradition to change at all. And the Catholics are very good at that. And the Protestants simply carried on the traditions of the Catholics. Excuse me. And if one look at the message and the life of Christ that we have record of, he did not accept the traditions as they were accepted at that time. The Sabbath day. He did work on the Sabbath day. He dealt with the non-Jews. He constantly confronted the thoughts and traditions of the culture he interacted with, and for that they killed him. However, he did honor the tradition of paying taxes, which is something I'm not really into supporting. As far as the current manifestation is concerned, I don't know where taxes come into play in an equal money system that is proposed by Desteni, but as far as paying into the system that is so corrupt and abusive and misappropriate, I have no desire to have a job in this world where I have to report my income and pay taxes on it. One is forced to pay taxes when one buys something. I don't really buy things. I don't have money to buy them. But if I did, I would most likely pay taxes. I mean, I would have to if I wanted to buy it, unless there was a place where there's no sales tax.